Hello, book lovers, and welcome to Authors Love Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. My name is Kimberly Hensle Lowrance, and I'm your host. Here on Authors Love Bookstores, we bring to you a conversation between authors and their favorite independent bookstores in order to shine a light on storytelling and creativity, essential parts of our culture and our collective human experience. We talk about the books written by our guest author, and we'll also discuss what makes the indie bookstore we're featuring so special. We hope you'll be inspired to read our guest writing, buy a book from the bookstore we're featuring, and someday visit the bookstore when it's safe to travel. I host and produce this show in conjunction with fellow writer Joe Moldover, and we're so glad that you're here. If you're watching live with us on Facebook and YouTube, feel free to post a question via a comment below the broadcast, and we'll get to as many as we can later on. So today, I am so pleased to welcome author Gina Frangello. Her new book, we're holding it up here, Blow Your House Down, just came out yesterday. Congratulations, Gina. We're very excited for you. And also with us today is Sarah Hollenbeck. Sarah is a co-owner of Women and Children First Bookstore in Chicago. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's do a little bit of bios before we get into the conversation. So Gina. So as we mentioned, here's Gina's memoir, just came out yesterday from Counterpoint Press. Gina is also the author of 4 books of fiction, most recently, well, I should say, there are many books, 4 books of fiction, including Every Kind of Wanting and A Life in Men. Her short fiction, essays, book reviews, and journalism have been published in a number of publications, including Plowshares, the Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, 5 Chapters, Prairie Schooner, the Chicago Reader, and on and on. She is a creative nonfiction editor at the Los Angeles Review of Books and a co-founder of Circe Consulting. She previously served as an editor at the Coachella Review, Other Voices Books, The Rumpus, Tri-Quarterly Online, and The Nervous Breakdown. I'm going to run out of fingers. Gina, you've done so much. We're so glad you're here. And then Sarah is also with us. Welcome, Sarah. So as I mentioned, Sarah is the co-owner of Women and Children First Bookstore in Chicago. Sarah is also a Chicago-based writer. She earned her MFA from Northwestern University. Her essays exploring sexuality, gender, disability, and the perception of self have appeared in a number of journals and blogs, including Tri-Quarterly, Dogwood, and In Our Words. She's also worked at Independent Publishers Group and Story Studio. And Sarah, you were a bookseller at the store before you became one of its co-owners.
Yes, that's right. Back in 2013, I was a bookseller, and I'll just launch in. The co-founders of the store who know and love Gina so much, Anne and Linda, they were exhausted after running the store for 35 years. It's such a physical job. And so they put up the store for sale in a national search in 2014. And Lynn and I, who both worked at the store, decided, we met in secret before the store opened one day and wrote a business plan and tossed our hats in the ring to buy the store. And they selected our proposal, and the rest is history.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Now, Gina, you've described this bookstore as, quote, my favorite bookstore on earth. I read an essay in which you said that. I'm sure you visited many indie bookstores. What is it about Women and Children First that's so special?
Well, so, I mean, I think, first of all, Chicago has an amazing independent bookstore community, full stop. There are a lot of great places. One of the things that I love particularly about Women and Children First is first of all, they have a lot of books that I am personally interested in because they are really interested in gender. They have a great kids book selection. So I have 3 kids and we got to spend a lot of time there and picking out books. They have amazing events. They host, just such great authors from all over the place. And also, as a publisher, I have published a number of women who used to go into Women and Children First, like before they were ever writers, when they were younger, and kind of just linger and feel like, oh, this would be the dream. I could never be in here. And then as a publisher was able to sort of have their launch parties at Women and Children First, and just, it would make their dreams come true. And at one point there were so many feminist bookstores around the country, and many of them have, have closed because of sort of the difficulties that independent booksellers started to face. And so Women and Children First has stood the test of time. It is still thriving. It's such a vital part of the Chicago literary community, and I think the whole national literary community.
Can you explain to us what's a feminist bookstore? For those readers who are watching and who have never been to one before, how would you describe what makes your store a feminist bookstore?
Yeah, so like Gina said, there were over 120 feminist bookstores in the 1980s and 90s. There are now fewer than 10.
Wow.
So it's just been a steep and kind of devastating decline. But what sets us apart and what actually I believe keeps us going is our very strong niche, and we are driven by our mission, and our mission has always been, since we opened, to celebrate and amplify underrepresented voices. And when the bookstore opened, Anne and Linda really just focused on women authors, and they the legend is that they had one shelf that was called Books by Men We Like, and it was just a single shelf, and that's how limited that was. But now, I think, as you both know, feminism has evolved, and the store has evolved right alongside that. So we now carry books about by all genders, celebrating all genders, understanding that everyone, regardless of gender, can be a feminist, and can and we are more focused on the voices that need to be heard and less restricted by the gender of the author. So the mission, I mean, there are so many amazing mission-driven bookstores across the country, and I think it's really exciting that more and more bookstores are having these conversations, right, about who's on the shelf and who's not on the shelf. And it's exciting that Anne and Linda back in the 70s, we're already having that conversation about who needed to be heard, and we're just continuing to build on that.
Well, there's such a vital role that bookstores play in fostering conversation. And so that conversation can be incomplete if you only have one point of view on the shelf, right? So to have all the voices come together, I'm preaching to the choir right here, I know. But, it's such an important role that bookstores play in educating us and connecting us and shaking the way we think into new directions. So
and the one of the things that really does set this bookstore apart is that giant children's section that is the heart of the store. And Linda especially understood from day one that children often come attached to women, and they needed a space as well. And also, I am in love with our children's section because before so many other bookstores, it really focused on books that weren't about little white boys. And that is still a problem. Like, still in publishing, that's still such a problem that the majority of children's books are focused on little white boys. So they have been, and we continue to curate books beyond that. And especially books with two moms or two dads, which are really hard to find sometimes and shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just saying, as my daughters were adopted from China, and Women and Children First was the place that I could go and bring them, and there would be books on the shelf that were about all different kinds of kids, all different kinds of families, adopted families, children of color as protagonists. it was always reliable for that. And, you know, as a mom, I'd always loved the store, but that did increase my passion for the store for sure.
Excellent. So Sarah, you made a little video for us about the store. So our audience, we beg your patience with us because we're going to show this video, our first time showing a video here on StreamYard. So we're going to put it up on the screen and just for a little bit so people can see the neighborhood that you're in. And Sarah, you want to narrate a little bit about what they're seeing?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, that street sign right there says Women and Children First Way. The alderman, the city put that up several years ago, 5 years ago. And there's our storefront. It says open forever because we are very optimistic that we will be open forever. And then we're going inside. We just reopened to the public after being closed most of 2020. So this is a very exciting time. That's our front table with all the new books. Those are our staff recommendations. You'll see our shelf talkers all over the store recommending books. And then, yeah, I'm just walking into the store here before anyone else arrived this morning. And then these are our event books, and I just wanted to focus on Gina's incredible memoir that I devoured and hope all of you will as well. And yeah, and then I think it goes into the children's section as well. But yeah, I just wanted people to see a little bit of what the store looks like, since we can't be in it right at the moment because it's a full house and I didn't want to wear a mask during this interview.
I love that your bookstore is a full house today.
Yeah.
Like that, when you told me that, it made me so happy that people are out there buying books. And we hope that they're buying Gina's book.
They are. We're sold out. We just ordered more. So, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, Gina, congratulations. Your book just came out yesterday. You just had your launch last night. How are you feeling?
Well, a little exhausted, but awesome.
So your book, let's see. Publishers Weekly it's a memoir, so calls your memoir searing, and says that you describe this bold and tumultuous period of your life in intimate and remarkable detail, and despite the tumult, you celebrate your own resilience. And I just finished it the other day, and I can't stop thinking about it. What inspired you to write a memoir? Your background's fiction, so what inspired you to write this story now?
Well, I've written short form nonfiction for 20 years or so, and I've been an editor of nonfiction in a number of different venues. So, and I've done journalism, so I always had, kind of a foot in nonfiction, but on the book level, I'd always focused on fiction. I get very obsessed with a novel. Sometimes I think about it for years before I start writing it, and that took a lot of my intellectual and creative energy my whole life. I've been writing since I was 4 years old. But when I was going through a lot of the events that are in the book, particularly around 2015, 2016, I'd already sold my fourth book, and I was in a period of waiting for it to come out. I had finished revising it actually while I was getting chemo for breast cancer in 2016. And I couldn't start a new project of fiction. Like, I had 3 different books in my head that I believed I wanted to write and that I hope I will still write someday. But I just did not have that space in my head for fiction anymore. My life had become very all-consuming in ways where I was constantly thinking of connections between what was happening to me and just things that had been intellectual curiosities for many years. The book does have a fair amount of cultural criticism in it as well. It's a hybrid of kind of memoir and cultural criticism. And I just started writing some of it like privately for myself. And then slowly over time, began to realize that some of the things that I had written about in short form over the years and the things that I was writing about now, then in 2015, 16, 17, kind of all were part of a whole. And I started putting together what I thought was an essay collection at first. They were very disparate, out of order essays. One was a poem. I mean, they were just kind of all, kind of a piece of to themselves. And when I sold the book to Counterpoint, Dan Smetanka, my editor, and I really talked about like, well, how do we actually make one story arc out of all these many disparate threads? And so then I just started working on that, and that really cracked the book open for me.
So I have many questions for you after reading this book. And so one of the questions you actually just referenced was, this book and memoir in general is such an intimate experience because you were sharing so much of yourself. But you, in this book, the word I keep coming to is telescope. So you like telescope out your experience to, this is about women in my family. This is women in my neighborhood. This is women more generally. So you take this very personal experience and you make it in many ways universal. So even if someone didn't walk in your shoes, they can find themselves in the pages. Was that a deliberate focus of yours or a deliberate objective when you wrote the book?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, thank you for saying that. That's exactly what I hope will be true for readers. I think in that case, I really have been very influenced by a lot of writers who I've had the fortune to publish or to work with as an editor. I've known for many years that the type of nonfiction that interests me most, yes, I want a strong narrative about the author's life, if it's a memoir, but I really love the idea that a person's life is a lens to the larger world, and that all of our lives are in different ways. And so I realized that a lot of the things I'd written about in my fiction for many years kind of circled a lot of these same issues. But I had never really been able to delve into kind of like the cultural criticism side of things. And yeah, I mean, I think the book encapsulates a lot of different parts of my life: caregiving my elderly parents, my experience with having an affair, my experience with going through a divorce, my experience with breast cancer, with chronic pain, with a hip replacement, my friendships that were formative in my youth, just a lot of different threads that I think these are the threads, like being in the sandwich generation, being a mother, all of these issues like affect so many women. And so, you don't have to have had your elderly parents living downstairs from you. You certainly don't have to have had, an affair or a divorce, but that there are things in here that speak to the lives of many, many, particularly middle-aged women. And I feel like the memoir genre, I love so many memoirs. I didn't used to read many memoirs 15 years ago. And now I feel like they've really exploded. They've become very artful and exciting. But, I do feel that they're still kind of dominated by the stories of younger people. And so I really wanted to have a book where middle-aged women could find themselves and their concerns in ways that were not reductive or erasing them from certain aspects of like change, evolution, making mistakes, sexuality, all of these different threads that I think are probably on the verge of breaking through in the memoir form, but that have been less represented.
Is the process of writing a memoir creatively, is it different than writing fiction for you? How is it? If so, how is it different?
So yes and no. Yes, obviously super different, because when you're writing a novel, like say you have an outline, say you have an idea, and then it's like the characters take on a life of their own and they don't want to do that thing that you had in your outline. And so, okay, they do some totally different thing. It goes in a completely different direction, and anything is possible, right? I mean, it's all in the writing. With a novel, anything can work. I mean, look at, Harry Potter or whatever. I mean, everything, the sky is the limit. Your imagination is the limit. And if you can make it work in prose, then that's it. Whereas, of course, in nonfiction, you have a, predetermined plots. Like, I can't just decide that it was inconvenient for my character to get breast cancer because too much was already going on. So, you have the ingredients of your life as, in a sense, like the plot points, and you have to figure out a way to make them all work together. So that's a really, really different thing. But the thing that I think, and I talked about this last night, and Sarah was there for that because her store hosted the launch. But the thing that I think helped me the most as a fiction writer was the knowledge of how you have to create a character in its complexity. Like you need to know something about the character's past and why they would behave the way they're behaving, why they have the demons that they have. You have to be willing to show your character in an unsympathetic light. They can't be perfect. You can't be overly concerned with wanting everyone to love them. You know, you have to try to make a full person and sort of go with that fictional adage that Janet Burroway talks about in her book, Writing Fiction, A Guide to Narrative Craft, that in fiction only trouble is interesting. So therefore, you know, if you're trying to just write something that's like inspirational or like, look how great I am or something, it'll fall flat. Like so the ability to kind of externalize myself as a character and be like, okay, let's see what trouble this person is going to get herself into was, I think that was a really handy skill for being a fiction writer when now I was that person.
You mentioned that you've been reading memoir more now. Are there particular memoirs that you would recommend to our audience other than your own, of course? We find that our audience always loves book recommendations from authors and booksellers.
So the first one that comes to mind, because I teach it in virtually every nonfiction class I ever teach, is Maxine Hong Kingston's The Woman Warrior, which in my opinion is a book that cracked open the genre. It won the National Book Award for nonfiction in the early 70s. And I think at that point, in my view, obviously I don't know every memoir written in that time, but it really reinvented the form for me. It had in it, so the author, Maxine Hong Kingston, sometimes it's just about herself, as you know, and her family and her life in California, and you know, her parents running a laundry and being Chinese American. But other times she would go off into ghost stories or stories of shamans or stories of you know, relatives who may or may not have existed in China and what may or may not have happened to them. And yet we always stay in this nonfiction realm because it's all filtered through the lens of what does this mean for her and what are the central issues she's trying to figure out. So I feel like anyone who kind of wants to understand what is possible in memoir, like that is the book to go to. But I love so many memoirs. I love Claire Dederer's Love and Trouble. My husband, Rob Roberge, wrote a memoir called Liar that, you know, really was majorly informative to me because I had not yet written a memoir. I love the work of Emily Rapp Black, who was my person in conversation last night. I don't think I would have leaned as heavily into nonfiction in general if not for being influenced by Emily's work. She, you know, really kind of blew the top of my head off. I love Roxane Gay. I love the work. God, so many people, you know, you're going to forget people. I've recently reread and been teaching Heartberries, which is a book that was out on Catapult, which is part of my publishing family. So yeah, I could go on for a while with that.
Well, those are wonderful recommendations, and we're putting the links underneath the broadcast for those people who want to investigate them further. And I'm sure many of those books are books that you carry in your store, Sarah.
Yes, for sure. Gina just mentioned so many books that are hugely popular among our staff and our community at large. I mean, Heartberries is probably one of our best-selling contemporary memoirs at this point. So yeah, and I wanted to shout out a couple other memoirs. Lily Danziger, I'm not sure that's how you pronounce her name, but her, I've admired her from afar for so long, and I'm so excited to host a virtual launch event with her and Megan Stilstra in May. Cannot recommend this book enough, about her parents' addiction and art of those artists, and just that collision of genius and art and catastrophe is it's really fiery, it's really powerful. So I'm really excited to see that or listen in on that conversation, and just another example of an incredible new memoir that's coming out soon.
I just had an event with Lily and she read from the book and it was amazing. So yeah. Totally. And Megan is just a rock star. So it's impossible not to love her.
Wonderful. So for our audience, we put the URL for the bookstore here below on the screen and also in the chat. So that's something to go to the website, check out the events page, find out more about this event that's coming up.
Yeah.
What other books have been popular in the store? You know, we've been talking with booksellers for a year now, and it seems like we hear a lot. It seems like books are popular as sort of they're a good barometer for what's happening in the country, right? Like the beginning of the COVID, everybody wanted recipes for sourdough. and then the summer it was really anti-racist books. And now what is it doing now? However, as we come to this, you know, past the year anniversary of COVID, what do people want?
Oh, it's very funny. I just had a conversation with a customer about this the other day, who came in looking for books on polyamory. And so, you know, I took him over to our sexuality section and realized that we had them cleaned out. And it was so different. It was just a turn that I hadn't noticed was happening, right? Until I went to the section and was like, oh my gosh, every book on polyamory or like opening up your relationship in a different way, in non-traditional way, I mean, what had been purchased in stocks. So it's just like an interesting, I think as people are emerging from the pandemic, that this is a trend that we are now seeing in our bookstore, which is kind of exciting. And then that's kind of a more fun trend that is happening right now. But also an incredible book, if anyone has read or has not read Minor Feelings yet, this will blow you away. Kathy Kong is, I think, just one of a national treasure, to be honest. Her writing about this Asian American reckoning, she just introduced me to an American history that we all should know by heart, but do not, and we are not taught about how Asian Americans are treated in this country for centuries. And so this was a history, also a memoir, just braided together so beautifully. She just really, I think, has a very accessible, funny, sharp way of looking at the world. Have you read Minor Feelings yet?
I'm dying to read it. I'm like, I've been like stalking that book online and like, so.
It's funny because they never print enough copies. I'm just saying that out loud. It has been on back order so often throughout the year. Definitely we are seeing a surge of interest in AAPI authors right now. And it shouldn't take a tragedy for people to be interested in their work, but that is definitely kind of a sad reality that I think a lot of booksellers are aware of.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things it sounds like we hear from our audience, and I know as a book lover myself, I love going into an independent bookstore because I know that the staff is so informed about amazing books. And I'm sure we all have had this experience where you walk in and you don't really know what you want to read. And there'll be this talented bookseller who will say, oh, you have to read these 3 books. And maybe you're not sure, but you trust them. And then you bring them home and they're amazing. And you're just kind of, your head explodes. And I'm always in awe of the way a bookseller sells a book, like the way of like matching a customer with a book. Sarah, what's the magic sauce at your bookstore? Like, how do you and your staff make that connection between reader and book?
Yeah, it's funny because my husband is an actor, and I think in some ways we have similar jobs in that he always says acting is about listening. You know, I think that's what a lot of actors are taught. And I think that's what a lot of the booksellers have to do too, right? Listen to what the customer wants. Maybe they don't even know what they want when they walk in the door. So you kind of have to tease it out for them. But oftentimes in my own strategy or tactic is I really try and be as personal as possible. I try and express my visceral emotion that I had while reading the book. Those are the books that grab me and hold on to me, that really, like Gina was talking about last night during her event, the books that are about the body. Those are the books that I want to put in people's hands, because I think it's something, as a disabled woman, I think it's something we don't talk about enough, how much our bodies inform how we absorb and feel the world. And so those are I try and like feel out a customer and feel out what they need, but then I also have a kind of a little agenda that I want them to, open themselves up to underrepresented voices, books by disabled people, books by women of color, listen to what they want, but also give them what I think they need as well. So I do think it's an act of listening.
Great. Gina, one of the things I was struck by, I think I'm struck by this anytime I read a memoir, but especially reading yours, is how much bravery it takes. I mean, right? There's a lot. I mean, you are trusting your reader with your story, and that is a brave act, right? To be vulnerable in that way. Is that just my impression, or what is it like as the writer of the memoir?
It's horrifying. Like, I literally don't know any writer who has written a memoir who has not felt essentially like vomiting for like the whole 6 months leading to the publication of their book. So thankfully I have a strong writing community, so I knew to expect that, and woo, yes. You have to reveal a lot of yourself. I think it has to do what I was talking about before in terms of like having to be able to externalize yourself as a character and detach from what the reader may think of you, and you may be able to do that while writing it on the page. Like, maybe you can actually get into the creative process enough that you're like, you stop censoring yourself in certain ways and all of that. But obviously, once you step back from the book, you're still your actual real self. So there is still this sense of like, okay, you're going to walk out of your house and, see your neighbors, and they're going to be like, read your book, So of course it's, my book deals a lot, as Sarah was talking about, with the body. It deals a lot with sexuality. It deals a lot with illness, with pain, like with all of these things that are really intimate, as well as, things that I did that maybe, I have not been secretive about the fact that I had an affair, and that was part of, what kind of set in motion a lot of things in my life in around 2015. But there's a difference between like people in your life knowing about it and actually writing about it, and then knowing that a lot of people are going to be like, I don't like her, she did this. And so it's hard. But I also think that for me, what ultimately made me feel like I should do it and that I was able to do it is that, there are so many people who do not have any kind of platform to talk about these issues at all, even in their lives. So I don't even mean they don't have a platform as a writer. They don't have a publisher willing to put the book out, but that these topics are taboo in their lives, and that they have never been able to have a conversation with anybody about, say, sexuality after breast cancer, or they haven't been able to ever talk about the fact that they or their partner had an affair and what happened. So I felt like, as a person who had that platform and who had support in my, in my family, in my friend groups, in the literary community, that it would be wrong not to tell that story, and to basically at least try to say in a way to like one woman at a time who reads this book, like, I see you, and like, I've been there, and this is a thing that's real, and what you're going through is real, and it's not only you, and you're not the only one who has had these feelings or had these fears. And the books that have made me feel seen, they've at times like kind of kept me going. And so just the idea that you could be that for even one other person is, it's major. It's a major idea that one person could feel differently about themselves and their life, and feel liberated in some way, or feel seen in some way. And so I felt less of it as bravery, because I don't really feel very brave. I feel seasick, but I feel like it became an obligation.
Right. Well, I'm sure your reader. Oh, no, I have an echo. If one person sees themselves on the page, right? One person, you can change a life that way.
I believe books change lives. Books have changed my life. And I was once in the audience at a panel at the Festival of Books in Los Angeles for the LA Times, while my husband was on a panel, and a guy stood up in the audience and said, I want to thank you because Liar prevented me from killing myself. And that moment was sort of when I thought to myself, like, yeah, this is real, like, if no one else on earth had ever read that book, I mean, it was like Barnes and Noble Discover Great New Writers book. It got acclaim, but like, if only that kid had read that book, then it would have been worth it. And so that was really a guiding principle for me.
But you're doing other good with your book. So you're donating a portion of your royalties
I'm donating all of my royalties currently.
All of your royalties.
Yeah, to Deborah's Place. I will stipulate that, like, sometimes books don't make a ton of money, so I'm not expecting them to open a block-long building with my funds. But to the extent that I'm able, I really, it's a book that is about the lives of women, and the lives of all women are not necessarily like places that enable them to sit down and read a book about their situation in life. Like, so women facing homelessness, I don't think my book is their top priority. And so I wanted to help not just like the women who might find my book, who maybe are already into literary memoir, who are already into books that have feminism in the title, but women who are literally thinking about life and death matters of where are they going to sleep that night, and will their body be safe where they're going to sleep. And so, I had been a fan of Deborah's Place's work from afar for many years. I'd known about them since I moved back to Chicago in, the mid 90s. And I just thought, well, to whatever extent the book is able to bring in revenue, I would like it to go to those women.
That's extraordinary. That's very special. I imagine it's just giving your book a whole other purpose, isn't it?
That's what I wanted. I mean, I love the literary community, but the world is bigger than just the literary community. So
that's really moving.
Amazing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your writing. We're going to speaking very profound topic, and we're all very moved. I got a little teary-eyed actually. So Gina, tell us a little bit about your writing life now. This book, or is it all promotion and celebration right now? Or are you also writing?
I mean, I actually went through a flurry recently of writing a bunch of essays. So I won't fully laugh and say like, what writing like? I went through a little period of productivity during the pandemic. You know, it, while it's been a nightmare on so many levels, the way our government handled it, et cetera, I won't hijack the show talking about that. But, for those people like myself who were able to transition and teach online, I'm in academia, didn't lose my job. I have a business with Emily Rapp Black doing consulting and online classes. And so, so for me, in terms of work, I actually had a little extra time because I wasn't commuting here, there, and the other place. I'm an adjunct teacher at a lot of different colleges. And so, sometimes I'm driving to Lake Forest, or I'm driving to where Northwestern campus is located, or, anywhere where I happen to be teaching. So I had a little extra time. I went through a period of productivity. I wrote a bunch of essays. But right now I have zero time. So I do have like three novels in my head and a short story collection that are all just sort of like, write me. And in reality, like, I'm lucky to answer an email right now. So it's going to be a little while.
Well, you've earned the space to celebrate your achievement, right? That's a notable part of the book process, is to
definitely
be honored, right?
Like, as a longtime indie publisher, and someone who's, in the literary community as an editor as well, the dialogue around books is really important to me. And so, I do not mind being engaged in that dialogue. I love it. I think it's so important. I remember, sometime around 2008 or so, when Twitter had exploded, and being at BEA, and everybody talking at Book Expo America about how, like, well, we're all going to have to write our novels on Twitter now. Like, the book is dead. It really is over. And instead, I feel like the exact opposite happened. I feel like literature really had a comeback right around the time that the internet exploded, and that we didn't actually all have to write our novels on Twitter, because instead Twitter was talking about books, and and Facebook was talking about books, and Instagram, and all of these things. And so I feel like the dialogue around books has gotten actually a lot stronger than it was when I first got into publishing. And it's really a vibrant conversation that can span a lot of people who didn't used to have access to being part of that cultural conversation. So that's really exciting.
Great. Sarah, we always ask our booksellers this one to finish a sentence for us. So the sentence is, running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part, what else? What's the third magic element?
It has to be a community. Bookstores are community spaces. They always have been, they always will be. And we've just had to reinvent what that community means this year, because we've been closed for so much of the past year. But it's been so humbling and so gratifying to see indie bookstores survive this year that we thought would crush all of us, and not only survive but thrive. Our community just rose up, and we're like, nope, not today. You're not closing. We just saw this swell of online support for our online orders, and so it was just so gratifying. And also, the other part of this is we also never interrupted our partnerships that we've been developing for years. So we've been collaborating with Chicago Books to Women in Prison for the last 4 years or more. And so that's when we, get the requested books from incarcerated women and trans folks to them, not just donating whatever people don't want, but getting them the books they actually want to read. So that partnership got stronger than ever this year because people realized how mistreated and incarcerated folks were during the pandemic. And so that swell of community support, that people weren't just locked down in their own tunnels of them getting through this year, but thinking outside of themselves and thinking about who else needed support was just so overwhelming. And yeah, bookstores would not survive without communities.
Well, we've come to the end of our time together. I'm disappointed. I've had a great conversation. I could talk forever to the two of you. But I want to make sure that our audience knows to go to womenandchildrenfirst.com to find out more about upcoming events, to place an online order. If you're in the Chicago area, the store is open and you can go, you are lucky and you can go and walk around the aisles and have Sarah make a recommendation for you. And to find out more about what Gina's up to, her website is ginafrangello.com. And you have a whole org.
That was my old site.
You're an organization now. Okay, ginafrangello.org. And you can learn more about her amazing book. We put the link to buy this book below, so you can buy it from Women and Children First. You have a lot of events coming up, Gina. I know you're back on A Mighty Blaze tomorrow.
Yes, I'm
back. Caroline, love it. We wouldn't let you go just once. We had to have you come back again.
And tonight I'm at the Strand with Joanna Rakoff. So
awesome. Great. So definitely hop over to Gina's website to find out more about what's coming up in her book tour to celebrate her memoir. And if you like today's show, audience, which we hope you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook so you can get notified about all of our other interviews with authors, or hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to subscribe to our newsletter. And thank you, Gina. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for spending time with us here. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful. It's always good to see you, Gina. Nice to meet you.
2 days in a row, I feel very lucky.
Yeah, someday we'll reconnect here in Chicago.
And then
come back soon.
So book lovers, join us back here next week for another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.